Hey guys, in this video I'm going to teach you how to play king and queen against king and rook. We're going to call this step number 1, getting the opposing king near the edge of the board. So I had a ChessGoals member recently ask me, how do we get the opposing king towards the edge of the board? Because all the YouTube videos out there skip that step. And sometimes it's kind of tricky to figure out how to force that king to the edge with the opposing rook checking our king. So what I'm going to do, teach you how to get the king near the edge. And at the end of this video, I'm going to link you to another video that shows you how to complete the checkmate once you get the king near the edge. So this is going to be step 1. So what I recommend doing is first getting your king close to the action. So king d2. And let's give black rook e4. So one thing that the side with the rook needs to do is try to keep the king and rook nearby each other. As soon as the king and rook get separated, there's a lot of potential for forks in the position. So that's something that we want, having the queen. Now what I'm trying to set up next is the key position to easily push that king and rook over towards the edge of the board. So I'm playing queen c7, and after rook d4 check, king to c3. This is the key position. So notice how the queen and king are separated by 3 squares on the same file. There's no rook c4 check. So the only options for black are moving the rook and king to the right hand side away from our king and queen. I guess this way on the video. So the black king has to go towards the edge of the board. At this point, rook e4 is the best move because everything else is going to get forked. The king cannot immediately go to e5 because of the check. Everything else will get forked. So rook e4, only move. Now we play queen to d7 check. If king to c5 is played, we have queen f5 check, picking up the rook. So the only move for black is king to e5. Now we play king to d3, setting up this same scenario. So if you get this position, it's actually really easy. Now there's only one move for black to not have the rook immediately forked. Now we play queen to e7. Same scenario, only one move for black, king to e3, and so on. You see the pattern here. So this will get us to the position where the black king is only one file away from the edge of the board. And now you can go into learning the other techniques on how to finish off the checkmate. All right, so let's look at another example. In this one, this is going to be with our king and queen separated, black to move, and black is going to check us with rook e4 check. So what I'm going to try to do now is set up that same position with our king and queen, 3 squares in between them. So let's start with king to d2, rook to d4 check, king to c3, rook to e4, waiting, and now we're going to play queen to g7 check, king to f5, and black could try to stay in the center here as well, king to d5. But then this is going to transpose to exactly what we just looked at. After king to f5, I'm still recommending queen c7, creating this scenario. So what's going to happen now is we're going to move the king and queen across the board towards the black king and force that black king over to the edge of the board. And the only things black can do are essentially what we just looked at, or black can separate the king and rook. So now we're going to look at what happens if they separate their king and rook. Rook to e1. Okay, now we can play queen f7 check. The king cannot step onto the e file because we can check the king, winning the rook. So king to g5. So here we see that king is already one file away from the edge of the board. Now let's play queen to f3. And what we're doing here, this is a lot of colors, but we're trying to control everything that's green and blue and keep this king boxed out onto the orange. And in this position, what we're doing as well is we're kind of making a waiting move, letting this rook choose a square because we know that the rook is eventually going to run out of squares on the e file. Okay, so rook to e5. This is the best move for black. Now we can play king to d4, hitting the rook. So notice the available squares for the rook right now. Rook to e8. Now king to d5. So this square is available. This square gets forked. right? So we have now shut down the black rook to only have one square on the e-file, rook to e7. Now after rook e7, king d6. So see how our king guards these three, our queen guards these three, and this one we know we have the fork, rook back to e8. Now this I think is where a lot of players get caught up. How do we make progress when the black rook cuts off our king? Playing king up to d7 doesn't help because the rook can go to the e5 square. So what we do now is this nice little maneuver where we're going to create this exact same position but make it black to move. Because we know if it's black to move here, there's no rook e1 due to the fork. And if the black king moves, it has to move closer to the edge of the board, right? So the king either has to go up towards the 8th rank or it has to immediately come over to the h file. Both of those we're making progress. So watch this maneuver. Queen g3 check. The strongest move, according to the table bases, is king f5. King to h5. That gives us the king already on the edge of the board. Now we play queen to h3 check. So look at all the different squares for the black king. If, for example, king to f4 is played, we have queen to h4 check. And we're going to be forking it with the king and rook very shortly. King to e3, queen e1 check. So the best move for black is to put the king back onto g5. Black doesn't want to give up too much progress in terms of trying to stay close to these center squares. So king g5, now we play queen to f3. So compare this position to this position. This one, it's white to move, but we've now created this exact same position and it's black to move. And there's no good moves for black because the rook cannot stay on the e-file and the king has to give up ground. So if a move like king g6 is played, we go queen f4. There's still no rook e2 or rook e1 because we have forks in both cases. So this is how you get that pesky black rook off of the e-file and make progress to finally get the checkmate. So one other thing we should look at, instead of king g5, what if king f6, trying to stay close to this square? That's a good move. There's a couple different ways we can play this. I think queen to h6 check is the simplest, because if king to f5, we get the fork, and if king to f7, we now have queen h5, and all of a sudden that black king in just 2 moves is all the way back on the 8th rank. So this is where you're now close to the checkmating technique. You can play like queen h7, but that's beyond the scope of this video. So we're just showing how to get that king to the edge of the board. So this is called the Philidor position, not to be confused with the rook and pawn versus rook Philidor position. This is how you try to win with king and queen against king and rook. Now, I looked through probably half a dozen videos on YouTube, how to win with king and queen against king and rook. And the best video that I could find was by Hanging Pawns. I think the Hanging Pawns video on queen and rook, king and queen against king and rook, is a very good and thorough video that also gives tips on how to defend with the king and rook. So that's what I'm going to link you guys to next. So there's going to be a box probably up here to take you over to that video. Go check it out, and if you watch the video, put in Hanging Pawns comments that ChessGoals sent you here, because I'm very interested to see if he sees that our channel is referring some people over to his video. But it's an awesome video. Hanging Pawns does a really good job explaining everything. So this is step number 1, king and queen against king and rook, how to get the king near the edge of the board. Step number 2, go check out Hanging Pawns video. So I hope you guys enjoyed this little endgame tutorial. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.